Welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, all eyes are on China with just a month left to go before its city of Hangzhou hosts the G20 summit. But more importantly, what will China bring to the table in terms of stabilizing the sluggish global economy? And is it goodbye to glitz and glamour of traditional showbiz as China's Wang Hong or internet celebrities rake in more money than the country's top film stars? Well, if you believe it. We begin today's program with the upcoming G20 summit in China's Hangzhou city. As the global economy continues to languish, the summit, themed towards an innovative, revitalized, interconnected, and inclusive world economy, may grasp the world's attention.
30 days to go. The countdown is on until the G20 summit opens in Hangzhou, Zhejiang province. As host of the 2016 summit, China has spared no efforts in preparation and is ready to greet the heads of states from all over the world.
At this moment, we can announce that the preparation for the G20 summit is complete. We keep refining security, making plans and drills for all possible emergencies in order to ensure our guest reception, venues, and key facilities are running well.
First founded in 1999, the G20 started out as a forum for finance ministers and central bank governors from 20 major economies to discuss global economic matters. Since 2008, the heads from G20 member countries periodically confer at summits. Collectively, the G20 economies account for around 85% of the gross world product, 80% of world trade, and two-thirds of the world population. And ahead of the 2016 summit, experts and government officials gathered in Beijing to discuss some of the trade and investment outcomes that could be reached.
The G20 summit is very important this year because there's so much uncertainty in the world economy. With a downturn in the growth and trade, with the problems in Europe and the potential departure of the United Kingdom from the European Union. And it's important for the G20 countries to assume a leadership position and show a way towards future growth in trade and the economic performance of the 20 countries.
Since the 2008 financial crisis, some G20 member states have proposed economic stimulus plans, but struggle under a dilemma of trade protectionism. Prior to the G20 Hangzhou summit, a consensus was reached during July's G20 trade ministers meeting in Shanghai.
During
the recent trade ministers meeting, they decided to establish a system of indicators to monitor those countries' actions, which is a step towards implementation. In the summit, the leaders are likely to emphasize the importance of opposing trade protectionism and reach agreement and principles on this.
China is the world's second largest economy and one of the largest trading nations. And to integrate its development with the global economy, China has been actively participating in building a new world economic order. And no doubt, the upcoming G20 summit will play a historic role in boosting the global economy.
For more discussion on what will be on the table during the G20 summit in Hangzhou, we're having in Beijing Mr. Liu Baocheng, professor and also dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, sir. Also in Brussels, we're having Peter Klepp, who is the head of the Brussels office of Open Europe. Meanwhile, joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S., Scott Kennedy, Director of Project on Chinese Business and Political Economy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the three of you. So, Professor Liu, coming from China, Hangzhou is to host the G20 summit. Is the city and is the country ready?
We are more than ready. So from food to transportation to the security and for agenda and with the volunteers ready, with the foreign language ready, with cheer band ready. So, you know, what not?
What is not? Everything is ready except the content. Let's talk about the content, which is the most important thing, why there should be a summit. Mr. Kennedy. Previous G20 summits, some believe it has been an important international governance platform, while others say it is mainly a talk shop. Which one would you subscribe to?
I'd say it's an important talk shop. Not a talk shop is incredibly important, even if they're not making critical decisions that they're going to implement right away. But there's a lot of issues related to growth of the global economy, trade, investment, the financial architecture for the world that's a little bit rickety and needs some fine-tuning that need to be addressed. And the G20 is one of the best forums that brings together wealthy and developing countries together to talk about those issues and collaborate with other international organizations, bilateral agreements, unilateral steps that will be taken. So it's a part of the overall global governance infrastructure that is critical to addressing issues, even if it doesn't itself make the critical decisions and implement things right away.
Okay. Even though you say it is extremely important, a talk shop, however, we have seen over the past few years some soul searching among some of the other host countries of G20. For example, Australia, for example, Turkey over the past 2 years. They say it's wonderful that they hosted the event, and yet they also regretted it that nothing really concrete and fundamental have come out of those summits. So let me go to you, Mr. Klepp. Do you think we have really more things to work on? Especially now, China invited more developing economy than it ever been on any G20 summit. This time, you know, even more members, Chad, Laos, Senegal, Egypt, Kazakhstan, together with some of the other already existing developing and emerging economies among G20. So do you think more developing emerging economies is likely to solve the problem, or there's likely to be a bigger fight between this camp and the developed economies, that camp?
It's probably not a bad idea to also involve some countries on invitation in order to discuss specific challenges with them. But one particular issue which definitely will be discussed, is being discussed at the G20, is of course the currency issue. The concern, especially coming from the United States, that China's currency would not be sufficiently strong, that it is artificially suppressed. Of course, many people in the West say that the United States is doing the same, that we're having some kind of a currency war ongoing, to put it a bit in inflated terms. But of course, at the end of the day, probably what China needs to do is to allow some of the financial bubbles that have been erupting as a result of excessive artificial stimulus to unwind.
Well, Mr. Klepp,
so China can have more balanced growth.
Well, it's wonderful that you're already giving us analysis of the Chinese economy, and yet coming from Europe, you almost forget there is one of the biggest uncertainty in the world, that is the Brexit, and what's likely to happen between the UK and also the EU. So what do you make of what's happening in your home turf? And also, how likely do you think the G20 economies, including many coming from Europe and the others, likely to deal with that? After all, by the way, sir, the finance ministers and also the central governor conference earlier about the G20 was exactly talking about that.
Well, I would not describe Brexit as the first challenge of Europe, only the second. I think the first is the banking crisis in the Eurozone. If you look actually what happened after the Brexit vote, especially Italian bank stocks suffered much more severe than UK stocks, which actually haven't been doing all that bad since the Brexit. So I think there's an understanding in Europe that they will work it out. The stakes are just far too high. The UK will leave at some point in the future, but many people realize that this can take 5, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe 10. And at that point of time, Britain will likely enter a new status, which will be very similar to its current status.
Well, Mr. Klepp has already responded to my call to do some self-criticism about his own continent. It is also viable, Professor Liu, that you can do some self-criticism or self-assessment of the Chinese economy. Before you do that, we all know China, the world's second largest economy, has long been the engine of the global economy. According to the IMF, China is expected to grow 6.6% this year, up slightly from the previous estimate, and 6.2% in the year 2017's growth prospects have improved modestly because of multiple interest rate cuts, increased government spending, and stronger credit growth. That's, of course, according to the Chinese government. But what do you think, Professor Liu, the factor of the Chinese economy and its impact overall on the growth of the world?
I think now, to compare with the sluggish growth around the world, China is still a major contributor to shore up the economic recovery, although it is slow, and China is facing its own problem with the downward pressure. And in the meantime, China is also moving very steadfastly towards a more of an innovation-driven economy. We are going through a lot of painful structural changes, institutional reform, and anti-corruption going on. So now China is also ready to invest more around the globe, and by trial and error, and it's also a big learning process to have more of the global and social responsibility for Chinese companies. And now with the One Belt, One Road program, with the AIIB in place, so I think China is offering, number one, a showcase of pragmatic approach to solve global problem, to seek for tangible outcome. Number two is that China is a strong proponent for the free trade and also the reduction of investment barriers. So going for also for RMB liberalization. So I think China is on the right path.
They're on the right path, but how fast? That's probably one of the questions that needs to be discussed. And how much be able to go against the challenges while on the right path? That's also an issue. But let's go to you, Mr. Kennedy. The other two gentlemen were very modest in a way. They all talk about their own issues. What about issues of the United States? It is still the biggest economy in the world. It is having some problem with China, with the rise of China, geopolitically.
Yes.
And its stance, its standards these days might not be necessarily all accepted by others anymore. Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah. I think actually, broadly, thematically, there's a consensus amongst the G20 countries that we saw at the trade ministers meeting at the beginning of July, in the finance ministers meeting a couple weeks ago, and that we'll see in September, and that to get stronger global growth that's sustainable amongst wealthy countries and developing countries, you need to use fiscal measures, monetary measures, and engage in structural reform. The challenge, though, is that not every country can use the same tools because they have different fiscal situations, monetary situations, and debt is growing globally. And so that leaves structural reforms. The U.S. faces its own structural reforms that it needs to carry out. China does. These are the most difficult things because they create losers who need to be compensated in some way without expanding debts more and continuing to generate growth. China is struggling with its own supply side reform efforts. The U.S. is trying to adjust to globalization. We're seeing that reflected in our political campaigns this summer and into the fall.
Right.
Everyone wants to do something. Everyone knows what they need to do. But politically, they are super challenges, not just in China, but in the United States and other countries as well.
Mr. Kennedy, I really want to follow up on what you have just said. It is not just the United States which you see a very dramatic presidential campaign going on. Everybody knows that you don't have the best candidates for the president, at least besides the two party members. But one thing is very interesting. You see some very similar symptoms worldwide. You see political gridlock in Washington, D.C. You also see political gridlock worldwide. You see the rise of extreme politics, left or right, whether in the U.S. or in Europe, and some of those countries, such as Japan, also in Asia as well. You also see moderate leaders, political leaders, being replaced by some extreme voices in political spectrum, and it's likely the latter that is winning so much popularity. So under these circumstances, the G20 summit, what can really the current political leaders do to make a change to the already existing problem? Political gridlock is the biggest thing that is hindering further policy alliance worldwide. Mr. Kennedy.
I think that's a very astute analysis, Tianwei, and I really wouldn't challenge it other than to say, I know things look gloomy on economic front and security front in a lot of different areas, but we don't want to overstate how difficult things are. The Asia Pacific is still growing relatively well. There's no wars ongoing, although there's possibilities for some current leaders in the United States, in China, in Europe, still are committed to collaborating with each other. And I think we're going to see out of the G20 summit in Hangzhou not major breakthroughs, but a series of incremental pieces of progress in a lot of different areas. It's not going to be something to say that everything has been solved, but we'll see. There'll be some measures on growth, on finance, investment, on currency that we can use to move forward. So I don't want to say that it's all gloom and doom and we ought to just turn out the lights, and there's still good reason to go to Hangzhou.
Oh, we love to turn on the lights, Mr. Kennedy, as long as we have enough power, of course. But Professor Liu, let me go to you. We love the list that Professor Kennedy gave. I have already noted them down. We'll see whether they're going to come true or not. But to you, there has been a lot of talk about emerging economies, developed economies have so-called stagnation, structural stagnation. That was the word used by Lawrence Summers, who is always very rhetorical and also outspoken. He talked about aging population. He talked about the very challenging structural reform. He also talked about the kinds of huge technological change in the world which make people to save more rather than to spend more because they don't know the future. That is not likely to change in a short period of time. So how much do you think the political leaders really have to work on it in order to make sure people understand change has to happen, and it has to happen also from their own little space as well?
I think number one, they need to inject more confidence into both investors and consumers by building more consensus, at least to identify a problem that the whole world is facing. And then they need also to find a strategic roadmap, which is really in the missing for the number of rounds for the G20, and then they set up specific goals. And so I think more practically, we really need to see more of the early harvest and picking the low-hanging fruits so that people can really feel the tangible benefit by believing and working together with the leaders.
Okay, you've already talked about 4 things. One is problems, roadmap, solutions, and early hanging fruit. 4 of them altogether. Let me go to you, Mr. Klepp. Will that happen? We understand that the political leaders, when they gather together, if they really need to have some kind of political achievement in order to report back home, they need to work very hard, and they have to work hard from now on almost. We see, Mr. Klepp, earlier in the G20 finance ministers meeting, they come up with 10 huge pages of achievements, and it have 35, if I have it right, different kind of attachments to that document, and also 19 issues to work on, beautifully out there. And yet, really now, we are talking about the top political leaders, whether they have the wisdom and the capability and the guts to do something. Mr. Klepp.
Well, I think most developed countries need indeed to make a number of urgent reforms. One of the reasons why populists are becoming more popular across the Western world is because of the failure of the mainstream. The mainstream has been making all kinds of promises and hasn't done all that much to be honest. If you only look at government spending, for example, it's going up for all the talk of austerity. The scope of the state is much bigger than it used to be. If you want to start a company, you're faced with bureaucracy, with high taxes. So this is of course not conducive to economic growth, and companies should be liberated. Back in the 80s, Thatcher and Reagan, they made a number of courageous reforms. Of course, there was a lot of opposition because there are always vested interests. But I think eventually, if countries want to create a lot of jobs, in order to sort of avoid that people start voting more on parties, they will need to do what has worked in the past, which is to implement liberalization of the economy.
I see. Mr. Kennedy, how low can we fall in order to bounce back? At the G20 summit this time, how much do you think President Obama, which is already on his way to leave the White House, no matter what he has done over the past 8 years, would do in collaboration with his Chinese counterpart, for example, the Chinese President Xi Jinping?
Well, I think, if you want to look at 3 areas where I think we could see some progress at the G20, take away your super long list and kind of boil it down, areas where the U.S. and China agree, and I think probably most of the G20 would agree, would be, first of all, on a real credible achievement would be recommitting to, at the earliest stages, arriving at an environmental goods agreement at the WTO. Those negotiations have stalled. They could decide that they'd want to achieve that an outcome by the end of this year. You could also see agreements on dealing with tax issues. I know that China anti-corruption is a big problem for the U.S. American companies going abroad to get tax breaks that seem unfair. There's common ground to deal with the global tax code. And you can also see some agreements related international norms for transnational investment to make that investment easier, more predictable, more stable, to get national treatment wherever it needs to go. And so those would be 3 areas where I would look for progress in September. They're going to be a long list, but if you could get those 3 areas, I think that would be significant and noteworthy, even if still incremental.
Professor Liu, before we go, we only have 30 seconds for you. You probably have a much longer list than I can give you the time for. What can the 2 presidents coming from China and the United States, after all, the 2 biggest economies, do now?
I think number one, we move closer on the BIT, the bilateral investment treaty. Now we are close, in
that's a big goal already.
List,
okay.
Right?
What about next?
And next is really to iron out some of the roadblocks for the against the free trade and the free investment. And number 3 is to build more political consensus over a number of issues that are still outstanding.
All right. Well, we have a lot to expect, I guess, and I hope all the expectations can be met to certain degrees, at least for the G20 summit. For now, thank you so much, the 3 of you gentlemen, for being with us and shed some light on a possible brighter future. Thank you. Liu Baocheng, Peter Klepp, Scott Kennedy. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. Some of China's hottest internet celebrities earn as much as 150 million yuan in a year. But is this economy sustainable in the long run, or will it soon pop? Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. We now set our sights on a brand new category of so-called famous people, internet celebrities. And in China, there's a whole new word to describe them, 网红. These grassroots celebrities mainly make their name by owning and fronting an internet clothing shop, making funny videos, or live broadcasting their life. There are so many in China now that incubators have taken to grooming the next big thing. So what's the business of internet celebrity like? And where are they leading our society to? That's a big question.
Well-taken photographs, pretty clothes, and some 270,000 followers. Weibo star Ashui has attracted quite a buzz on the internet. To her followers, she might merely be the pretty model for a Taobao clothing store. But in fact, she's the owner, and it's tough being the lady boss.
In my line of work, we have very little time for ourselves. Running an online shop means a very quick business cycle. We have to think of new things after one another, non-stop. I work more than 12 hours a day. It's a lot different than I thought it would be when I started.
Ashui may look like a one-woman show behind her flawless internet image, but she actually has a company of 100 people to help maintain that. 4 years ago, she had only 3 employees, but now her staff is involved in brainstorming and marketing sessions. Ashui's 12-hour days are paying off. She raked in 50 million yuan in income last year. But it's not all pretty faces and fashion for some of China's most famous internet celebrities. Some are known for their original content.
Papi
Jiang, famous for humorous videos which mock and criticize social realities, saw a 12 million yuan investment from venture capitalists in March. Why would anyone invest that much money in a grassroots celebrity? The answer lies in the 12 million Weibo followers at that time. Experts say the number of followers is an indication of net worth, and the market of internet celebrities is fast becoming a huge one. According to a commercial data company affiliated with Alibaba, the internet celebrity economy is estimated to be worth 58 billion yuan in 2016. That's higher than China's box office in 2015. But how long will these celebs be famous for? It's hard to say. In 2004, a woman named Sister Lotus gained attention through her funny pictures and remarks online. Her entertainment career is still doing well after some 10 years, an encouragement to thousands of others looking to change their lives through the internet. But the reality is, not everyone can be Sister Lotus. Whether this phenomenon will pop like a bubble or see longevity, it still remains to be seen.
For some discussion on web celebrities in and out of China, we have in our studio Julian Wang An, who is my colleague, our very own video journalist and news anchor. Welcome to our program. Usually I watch you on cultural news, but now it's wonderful to have you sitting in our studio as well. Meanwhile, joining us from Lancaster in United Kingdom, we have Dr. Astrid Norden, who is a lecturer of China in Modern World at Lancaster University. Welcome as well. First of all, Julian, do you want to be a Wang Hong?
Well, that is not exactly my aspiration, but I'm very fascinated by the phenomenon of Wang Hong itself.
Ah, how come?
Well, I think, first of all, it is something, it speaks for a trend for the society, and I think it also speaks for the generation, the millennial generation, who is very much very individualistic. And I think Wang Hong really speaks to the fact that, people they have this need to express themselves and to exert, and which is the reason why there is such a huge market for internet celebrities, and that's why the internet celebrities themselves are also thriving.
All right, it's very interesting that they express themselves, but it's extremely interesting to me, at least Dr. Norden, that so many people are watching them. Why? Why are they so interested? Do they have something else to do? Dr. Norden.
I think that celebrity has fascinated people throughout different cultures, including Chinese society, for a long time. And what's particular about this kind of celebrity is partly the forum, which is the internet, but also the intensity with which fans love a lot of these online celebrities, and part of that is access, that we can access them all the time. We can access them on the tube, on our way to work, during break at school, and that of course makes for a whole different kind of interaction.
Which one, Dr. Norden, do you fascinate about in terms of all the internet celebrities among Hong in China and beyond? How much time would you spend every day watching them?
Well, I watch them for research purposes, which is of course
I know you would say that.
Slightly different, and I couldn't possibly tell which child I love the most.
Cannot tell which one is your favorite at this moment?
No, of course not.
What about you, Julian?
Well, I watch them simply because I'm fascinated by people. I'm curious about people, and actually, I've only recently, learned about these one-home people, these internet celebrities.
So who have you watched?
So here
you don't
in
have
China,
to mention names. You can just talk about what they do.
well, we have the what's her name? See, that's why I forget her. I forget her name. The Papi Zhang. Papi Zhang, she is somebody who she has so many followers here in China. She has 13 million followers on Sina Weibo and 14 million followers on WeChat account.
For many of our international audience, it's an astronomical number, but we have 1.4 billion people here in China. So for those of you who do not necessarily understand this number, this is some background information you need to bear in mind. Anyway,
that is true, but not everyone can garner product placings or plugins that is auctioned for as much as 22 million Chinese yuan, and that is phenomenal. That is a large number. And at the same time, on the other hand, we also have Xia Yi, who has online shops on Taobao, and she is famous because she is the ex-girlfriend of the son of the Chinese mogul Wang Jianling, and he is and ever since he's separated from the boyfriend, her popularity has gradually diminished, which is different from Papi Zhang, because Papi Zhang, her selling point is very different. She makes these videos in which she makes very witty and very funny and very enlightening remarks, because she comes from a different background. She's highly educated with a master's degree from China Central Academy of Drama, and so she is very much grounded, and she knows the needs of the people and the desires of the people.
Well, it seems that you are already quite familiar with all their backgrounds. It seems to tell people that you need to have your own education in order to, rather than having a boyfriend which you are separated from. But anyway, let's just put that aside. Talking about what the Wang Hong has garnered financially over the years, let's take a look at some of the numbers. Some dubbed the year 2016 as the beginning of Wang Hong economy era, as a series of reports revealed how lucrative the business is. Zhang Dayi, which is one of China's best-known online celebrity, well, of course, there's a different interpretation of what is best known, reportedly earned $46 million, while pop Chinese actress Fan Bingbing, the one on your right, reportedly by Forbes, made only $21 million last year. That's some real motivation to be a Wang Hong right there. A report by Chinese Tencent browser shows 54% of Chinese who were born after 1995 dream of being an internet celebrity or Wang Hong. But insiders say the failure rate of Wang Hong incubators is over 95%. Dr. Norden, first of all, do you really believe in all these numbers? These are public information, and Wang Hong all boast the huge fortunes that they have acquired over the years as a result of their fame, but no one could really prove how much they have really earned.
I don't think we have particular reason to doubt the figures.
Why not?
Their celebrity is no less than celebrities
to get famous,
in other
you just boast
formats.
of your income, you can get famous, right?
Yeah, but I think nonetheless this is a huge phenomenon, and the money that we see going into this is very different depending on what kind of internet celebrity we're talking about. So of course there will be a big difference between earning your money by endorsing products or wearing the clothes that somebody else produces, and on the other hand having your own massive production chain and producing your own clothes or makeup and so on. So there are very different kinds of business models that are collected under this internet celebrity phenomenon. Some of them, I have no doubt, are hugely lucrative, others perhaps less so.
But to what extent do you think this kinds of fame could be sustainable? And to what extent do you think it is changing the business culture and the celebrity cultures in China?
I think, again, it depends on which kind of business model. Some will be more sustainable than others, particularly for those who have sold themselves as a brand, where that brand is very much tied up with youth and beauty. Of course, that brand image will have to evolve over time. However, in other areas of celebrity, we can see that it is possible to do that. Madonna is a prime example of this, that time passing and the person selling their own beauty and charm growing older isn't necessarily prohibitive of continued fame and lucrative business.
Julian, what do you think?
Well, I think these internet celebrities, they don't have the complex system of strategies to kind of maintain and manage their own brands.
Really?
Like movie stars do necessarily. But what they do have, or what they do thrive on, is this: is that they have these elements of relative spontaneity. For example, they are very spontaneous, and they are often unscripted, which is like reality TV. And they have allowed their audiences to be fly on the wall and to be voyeurs, which is very much what documentaries thrived on in the early days. And they also allow their audiences to have very much complete, if not tremendous access to their personal lives. And I think these are very important. I think movie stars today, the personal lives, they live in the imagination of the viewers, whereas the personal lives, these internet celebrities, they allow their personal lives to be part of their lives. So, in general, I think the individual lives, the longevities of the stars are short-lived, but the phenomenon as a whole, the industry as a whole, is going to be sustainable and self-regulatory.
It's very interesting that you consider their apparent personal life on the screen is necessarily part of their life. That's very interesting. Having said that, though, Dr. Nordin, let me go to you. Many of these so-called internet celebrities, they try to create some kinds of mirage about their life. For example, they in and out of the most famous restaurants around the world, travel to most well-known cities, having the best clothes on, boast about their annual fortunes. How much of that really caters to the current people's needs of getting rich fast and getting rich through the shortcuts? And how much of that has to do with the aspirations everyone has to be rich and powerful, and yet do not have the access there? How much will they be able to fulfill, common people's grassroots level, especially teenagers, aspirations of that? Will that aspirations really help the China in 1995 or even later?
No, of course, not every young Chinese person who admires these celebrities will be able one day to have a life like they do. That has always been the case with our admiration for celebrities. Having said that, I think that there is some diversity in what these online celebrities do. So, for example, creating fun and joking online content is something that a lot of young Chinese people do engage in at a much lower level. They don't do it in this profitable manner. Of course, it doesn't enable them to necessarily travel the world and wear expensive clothes. But I think there are other ideals that are being put out there, and other ways of life that are also being put out there, perhaps a bit more on the sidelines, but simultaneously with the wealth and internationalization, globalization that we are more used to seeing being part and parcel of a lot of existing celebrity culture, both on and offline.
Yes, it's very much internationalization, not only the way they do things, but also even their face shapes, the way they look. They say many of those who are running the Wang Hong kind of style business, particularly selling clothes and beauty products, have the same kinds of face shape. They have the same kinds of aesthetics when it comes to their looks. What do you make of this, Julian? And how much impact is this having on the general atmosphere here in China in terms of judgment of aesthetics? And where are they leading the Chinese society to? I'm asking two fundamental questions in terms of a topic regarding internet celebrity. We shouldn't be that serious, but it's always important to take a further look at what is happening rather than just take a look at what is happening?
Well, if we're talking about plastic surgeries, right? They undergo a lot of plastic surgeries, but movie stars themselves also undergo a lot of plastic surgeries. But the difference is that movie stars, they go for standards that is more natural. They want to look more natural to their viewers. But the one point these internet celebrities are very different, because they themselves, they are girls next to the girl or the boy next door. But at the same time, plasticized, because they want their features to look very exaggerated. And one hypothesis is that people say is because when you're shooting 24 hours a day, non-scripted, and at home, the lighting is very bad and it's non-edited. It's not edited, right? So you have to look picture perfect from all angles at all times.
For their motives, but where is it leading us to? Do you think, as a general society?
Well, what I can tell you is that a lot of people, when people say that you look like Wang Hong, one of those internet celebrities, is often meant not to be very flattering, if not pejorative. So you can imagine where that is going.
It's very interesting. It's also very similar to the atmosphere of the conversation we are having. On the one hand, Dr. Nordin, people joke about these people. On the other hand, people also fascinated about what if I could be, quote unquote, a celebrity one day. How would you see this phenomenon? We only have 30 seconds to go before we wrap up, but some explanation from you, Dr. Nordin.
Well, I think it's worth keeping in mind why these primarily young, very successful business women are once again criticised for the way that they look, and why it is that we pick on them rather than the wider culture of beauty and looks that surround them and to which they tap in. I think that we might consider where we lay the blame, if it's really these young, successful women who should bear the brunt of it.
All right, interesting. Astrid Nordin, Julian Wang Gan, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sure those internet celebrities will keep on popping up.
Thank you.
All over China in the next few months at least. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight, CCTV News into your find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone from the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.